All right, take it away, Erin.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. My name is Erin Bernard Harris. I am the executive director of the Bridgeway School based up in Northeast Philadelphia. I'm really excited to be able to present to all of you today. I shared with Jerry when he first jumped on the call that once upon a time I was a CASA EDM. So I really appreciate what you do and the dedication you show our youth because not only as a CASA, but also as a school leader, I see how much having EDMs in the mix really make a difference. So above all, thank you for what you do. Today, what I'll be able to do is share a little bit about Bridgeway so you know what we are, who we are, a little bit about our model and programming. And then if we have time, I'll talk a little bit about our work in the context of like the national recovery education movement. But to just start us off, Bridgeway is Pennsylvania's first and Philadelphia's only recovery high school. We serve students that are age 14 to 21, if the student has an IEP, up till 22, on their journey of recovery from substance use and co-occurring mental health disorders. As far as our mission, we take multiple things into account in our work. Not only are we empowering our youth on their journey of recovery, we're also dedicated to high quality education. So we do that through project-based learning and making sure our kids have certified teachers in every subject, including a special education coordinator who has at this point almost 20 years of experience, and holistic support and a compassionate environment that I'll share more about, but above all includes peer support as part of our model. We imagine a world where our youth are able to establish patterns of recovery and that they also are bringing their dreams to fruition. So our hope is that our kids find stability in the moment of high school, but they take that moment to really be thinking about the future and what they want to manifest as they become young adults. Our key values are connections, growth, resilience, healing, individuality, stewardship, responsibility, and joy. And that piece about joy, we don't take lightly. When we consider addiction, we know that the opposite of that addiction is connection. And part of connection is joy and experiencing things that are positive and being able to make sure our space is one where our kids can seek safety and also enjoy life in general. So that's our mission, vision, and values. As far as a history of Bridgeway, some people might not know us, and that is not something that is uncommon. I hear that from people all the time. But Bridgeway has been part of the mix for a little while. It was founded in 2011 by a woman named Rebecca Bonner, and she was a mother of a child in recovery. She had brought her daughter back home from treatment and didn't have an option to send her young person to a school that removed her from toxic people, places, and things after treatment. And so while there was no option for her at the time she brought her daughter home, she did a lot of work to establish Bridgeway as a place for families and really thinking about how that could actually impact the family unit. So it came from someone who really understood the work. Bridgeway was originally a private tuition school, and it was based in Manayunk. It has always been and continues to be a private licensed academic school with a tuition model, but that has shifted over time because in 2016, recovery high school legislation was passed that made it possible for 20 seats to be publicly funded, either through the state or through private scholarships. And those publicly funded seats are 60% from the Department of Education and 40% from the district. So at that point in time, there were a good subset of students, but it wasn't fully enrolled. And at this point, we are fully enrolled up to 20 students and then have 5 full scholarship spaces. What makes us really different now is that because of recovery high school legislation, demographics have really changed. And because the school has moved from Manayunk to the Northeast, we're much more accessible to our most vulnerable youth in the city of Philadelphia. We do work in partnership with the School District of Philadelphia, especially around special education. In order for a student to be enrolled, we don't need a green light from the district. We notify them if we're accepting a student and the education decision maker wants to enroll the youth. And then at that point, we pull their SPED department in to work with our special education coordinator to update the IEP and make sure that all of the services that they require are in place. So just to know, even though we're a private licensed academic school, nobody is paying tuition. We're really passionate about making recovery education accessible. And we are a partner of the school district to make sure kids get the special education services that they need and deserve. That is really important to me, not only as a former CASA EDM, but I'm a mom of three, and two of my children have had or do have an IEP. And so special ed is really, really important for me on a personal level. So I can't emphasize that enough, that in my work, I take that to heart. Also, just to share in terms of my own experience, I taught in Philly schools for 8 years before I shifted to leadership at El Centro de Estudiantes and Belmont Charter High School. I really like working with youth as they're returning to school after some sort of hiatus where social stress has pulled or pushed them out. And so this work as a school leader is really critical to me. And it, it really is the passion that I bring forth probably forever. But who's Bridgeway? So to give you a picture of where our kids come from or where they're referred from, there's all different referral partnerships. I mean, as you can see from this graph, about 30% of our students come to us either referred from the defenders, from the DA, or probation officers. What we really take into consideration in those moments is the program really right for the child, and is the child committed? I emphasize when we talk about our partnerships with juvenile justice is that even if a young person is court ordered diversion, no one can court order Bridgeway. The student has to choose Bridgeway, the EDM has to choose Bridgeway, and Bridgeway has to choose the student. So there are times where we interview youth and it's not the right fit yet, but we do everything we can to make sure that we are supporting our kids that are in the justice system. What we do find at this point, 50% of our students are special education, and nearly 100% of our justice involved students are also special ed. So we're really thoughtful about those intersections. But we don't just get referrals from juvenile justice. There's a lot of different nonprofits across the city, a number of high schools that like working with us. We have a very strong relationship with Hull Mercer FICAPS program at Penn, that family-based therapy program. Sometimes there's justice involved kids that come through Hull Mercer, but above and beyond, it's normally students that are returning home after inpatient treatment. As we started the school year in August, we had 21 of our 25 seats full. Today we're 24 and we have a number in the admissions process, but that is not to say that we won't have room, because our program, you can come into it and exit as is best for the scholar. We have students that come to us in 9th grade and stay through 12th grade. We also have students that might come in for 6 months because they're trying to reestablish a productive pattern in school and then want to return to their mainstream high school. We also have students that might come to us in their senior year and only be with us for 12th grade, which all of that is to say is that we have rolling admissions. Students do enter and exit the program when appropriate for them. And we also are working with state legislators at this point to add 15 additional publicly funded seats, which would mean that we'd have 35 public seats and 5 continued private scholarship seats. That would bring our enrollment capacity to 40. So I'm really excited to connect to you, knowing that, it's quite possible by December, we'll have quite a few seats open for our youth that need us most. We have students that come to us that have a history of inpatient care. 21 out of 21 of our students in August had a long history with high potency cannabis. So the other thing I just want to emphasize is that as much as we do target youth who are in recovery from opioids or cough syrup or other pills, and sometimes cocaine, we do really focus on cannabis in our program because it has been a huge pull-out factor for education. And we also understand scientifically that cannabis strongly impacts the development of the adolescent brain. So, we really do target that substance as one that we want to support our kids in avoiding for the sake of their own development. As far as our model, there's a number of pieces that I already started to mention. One is that high quality academics piece. We take it really seriously that our program is as best serving our kids as possible so that they grow as young scholars. They do this alongside alternative peer group and peer support. So our kids have group with a certified peer specialist 3 to 4 times a week. And then they also are able to have at least one private session with that CRS. And so they're able to set goals around recovery and have a private space to discuss what is challenging for them at that moment, what sort of things are on their mind, in a way that, unless it's some sort of severe issue that's related to mandated reporting, it's a private space for them to share and really take on the recovery with some autonomy. The other thing we offer is credit recovery. So we do often have kids that are coming to us after being pulled out from school and are returning and trying to make up credits and graduate either on time or as close to on time as possible. So we use not only some online programs for credit recovery, but we also do independent studies with certified teachers based on student passions in order to fulfill credit recovery courses. And, we really pride ourselves in trying to amplify what our kids need in that way. And then on top of all of that, we do operate with peer-minded leadership. I am a CPS and identify in mental health recovery. We have a fair set of our staff that either identify as in recovery from mental health or in substance use recovery or co-occurring. And so, we really try to make sure our kids can see themselves in our staff and that there's an ethic of care and a trauma-informed mindset in all that we do. Eligibility for the program, age 14 to 21, as I mentioned, 22 with an IEP. We are a high school, so we're grades 9 to 12. Students can come in at any grade level that is appropriate for them. They have to identify as on a journey of recovery from substance use and or co-occurring mental health disorders, or they have to be willing to engage in a recovery program. And I emphasize that because there is a shortage of adolescent treatment, especially residential, related to SUD in the state of Pennsylvania, but also nationwide. And so we do receive referrals for youth that might not have had a nexus for a diagnosis, but is appropriate for our program. But the important piece is whether or not there's a diagnosis, the youth has to be committed to engaging in our program. That doesn't mean they have to do perfectly in all that we offer, but we want that commitment piece. Pennsylvania residents can receive the publicly funded tuition or our private scholarship spots. We are accessible to a New Jersey resident if they were to pay private tuition. We just don't have scholarship funding that aligns with an outside state resident. And we do prioritize Philadelphia-based students. We have a little bit more flexibility with our private scholarships, but for our 20 publicly funded seats, we must legally prioritize students that are residents of a district of the first class, and we're based in Philly, so that's Philly. And to be honest, most of the time, all of our kids are from Philadelphia. We do sometimes work with youth who come to us from Bristol Township. We also have some students that have come to us from Delaware County or Upper Darby. And so we do like to partner with outside districts when appropriate. Why are we an abstinence-based model and push our youth to be in a place where they are not using substances at all? If we define abstinence, that's when someone is completely abstaining from drugs and alcohol. So they're not using substances in any way. That is the traditional model for recovery. So, partly we do that because research shows that people are less likely to have a recurrence of use if they're not using substances at all. But more than anything for our kids, it is because it is best for the adolescent brain and because there is research that suggests a young person who has a period of 12 months of sobriety in their high school years, they're much more likely to be successful or have positive long-term educational and economic outcomes. So it's an evidence-based practice. Of course, we can talk about abstinence, but I think all of you understand in the Zoom room that we have expectations around recovery and what we might like to see, even for ourselves. But the reality is that it's not linear. And so we absolutely understand that our youth can come to us and be in a place where they're committed or even already practicing abstinence and then have a recurrence of use. Unless a student has a recurrence with a substance that is overtly life-threatening, like an opioid or a benzo or cocaine, we do try to work as best as possible to pull in additional support so that they can stay enrolled. And for our students that we recommend for an assessment for a higher level of care, if they follow through with a recommendation from their medical team, because we can't diagnose, that's not our role. If their medical team offers a recommendation and they come back to us and they want to be part of our community, we absolutely welcome them back. We have partnered with families while students have been in treatment and had our teachers visit them and provide coursework that way. So, even when a student struggles, we do our best to make sure that they are still part of our community because that stability is so important for that adolescent's overall success rate. So what are the things we do to support abstinence? We have our peer group. Peer group is, sometimes sitting around and unpacking coping skills, emotion regulation, artistic or self-expression, runs the gamut far beyond that. But it's also a place where we do try to uplift that value of joy and have fun. We do an exercise called celebration every Friday where we bring in partners that can, illuminate activities that are fun. And we also just celebrate big and small wins. If someone got a job, if someone even has 3 days of abstinence, these are things that we celebrate. And we really do uplift the big wins too, right? If someone's just had a baby or if they hit their 2 year of abstinence, that's also a big piece for us. But just to say, we look for the small wins and the big wins, and that peer support piece is huge. The other things that we do to support abstinence include drug testing. So the student, when they come in, they do have to agree to drug testing. There is more drug testing that we do in the first month that a student is here than as they remain with us. However, it's random and it can happen at any time. And it's not done for punitive reasons. It's done to make sure that youth are safe and that we're monitoring progress. And when we think about safety, what does sometimes happen is that if a young person has a recurrence and they take an edible, sometimes they're contaminated with fentanyl. So that's one of our big moves, and drug testing keeps our kids safe. And we do name that for kids when they come in the program, and more often than not, they appreciate it. And I will tell you, when our kids take their drug tests and they're negative, they are excited. So just to say, like, it is not a piece that they see the same way as they might have seen when they were justice involved, or if they were in a program that required abstinence for residential placement. We have the peer group, CRS support. Our students do participate in the Association of Recovery Schools national survey, which sounds pretty formal, but what that survey does is provide us an understanding of their current recovery capital and what sort of supports they already have in their life that can lead to success with recovery. And it also lets us know what sort of things do our kids need. So they do that survey at least once per year, but we're trying to up that to every quarter. And we're also piloting a cohort model that provides us even more ways to target cannabis education so that our students understand it as well. So that cohort model, and we're trying it out this year for the first year. And it's partly because for the first time, we have 2 floors. Bridgeway historically has only been 1 floor here in the Northeast. And because we're expanding, we now have 2. And so we don't keep our kids fully segregated, but what we've been able to do is establish cohorts that go to coursework together. And there's a Pathfinders and a Phoenix group. Our Pathfinders are students that are committed to recovery education. They might experience periods of ambivalence more frequently, so they're kind of rapidly going through the stages of change, but always come back to a place of commitment and a desire to establish a pattern of abstinence and just general wellness in their life, right? Because we do consider the 8 dimensions of wellness. It's not that we're just focused on making sure that a student isn't using substances. We understand that there's a lot going on outside of our building that can lead to a recurrence of use. So we try to make sure we're addressing all of those things. And we really try to target them pretty acutely for a Pathfinders cohort. The Pathfinders cohort also has an additional layer to cannabis education as compared to our Phoenix group. And that's partly to help them understand how cannabis can affect their adolescent brains. Our Phoenix cohort has demonstrated a high commitment to personal recovery. That doesn't mean that their drug tests are always perfect. We really aren't looking for perfection, but what we are looking for is that they're committed to supporting each other as a collective, and they've established enough of a pattern of commitment to be ready to kind of look beyond themselves and be working as a group. And so, I'm really excited that we've been able to try out this program, and we're trying to take in data and share with other recovery high schools that also have a pilot of cohorts. So we'll be trying to use the evidence that comes back as like a nationwide movement as we push forward. The other things we offer in our program, really excited. We have a pretty significant grant right now for a program called We Are Wildflowers. And that has made it possible for us to work in partnership with Emerald Wildflower Garden and the Perch Music and Arts Workshop. It's right off of the York Dolphin stop on the L. And this space is a woodland garden, and it's also a pretty like high traffic space for arts and culture in the city at this point. And our kids are working as interns there, not only learning about horticulture and caring for the garden, but also leadership skills that leads to them curating their own events, which can be anything from a yoga workshop to right now they're planning a tea party for our entire community here. And so we really do try to lean into the pro-social aspect of being able to connect back into our community in a recovery focused way. A lot of times when our young people are participating in substance use support programs or outside groups, it is very contained or isolated. So that Wildflowers program is geared to be like, hey, how do we remain recovery focused outside of our space together in ways that we're learning and we're taking charge? Along the same lines, we have a recovery artist in residence program that we bring in an artist that either identifies in recovery or has worked with people in recovery for a significant amount of time to do workshops with our kids. And we've done things from watercolor to now we're doing printmaking. We created a mural in partnership with the City of Philadelphia Mural Arts Program. We've welcomed King Saladin to our space this fall, which is really exciting. So, that artist in residence program is ever evolving. We also run a men's group with One Day at a Time. We're partnered with Socks for the Streets, and they do a lot of support in making sure that our kids have hygiene products, clothing. They come in and do lunchtime celebrations with our kids. We have a partnership with Eastern State Penitentiary's LEAD Fellowship Program. Eastern State's LEAD program brings in people who are in reentry that are reestablishing employment, and we are able to pair those that are appropriate from that program to do small groups around the experience of being adjudicated, which is really special. We've just started a partnership with Beyond the Bars, so our students are getting more involved with music, and a lot of them love music, so that's exciting. And then we've also started a healthy relationships and grief workshop series that will be carrying through this year so that our kids can really think about how they care for themselves, each other, and manage change when they're facing loss. These are just some pictures from the Emerald Wildflower Garden. That's a picture of the perch inside. Our kids have been out there this fall, really make sure that the space is tended well and prepared for the winter. And this is a shot of the mural that we finished painting with Mural Arts. We're installing it over the next 3 weeks, so we're excited to see that up on the wall as soon as possible. And I'll just leave it really quickly with some data about why Bridgeway is needed, and then I can open it up for questions really fast. So some of the data that informs our practice is that 1 in 7 young adults experience a substance use disorder, and 50% of adolescents have experienced notable symptoms. So even without a diagnosis, 1 out of 2 adolescents have gone through symptoms of depression or anxiety that support in general is really productive. The common theme for co-occurring disorders beyond like mental health and substance use is trauma. And how that comes together with the intersection here in Philly is that more than 80% of Philadelphians have been affected by a traumatic experience by the time of adulthood. So where recovery education is important everywhere in the United States, It is really critical here in Philadelphia because we are serving youth who have been affected by trauma much more frequently and intersectionally than you might find in the suburbs. And that's not to say that someone in the suburbs have not experienced a high level of trauma, but that the incidence is more high here in Philly. Um, our kids need a small, safe, brave space. And so we really take it seriously to make sure that they can heal in a place that they are upheld as scholars. We believe in them, their ability to critically think, and that they can dream just as much as they're working on recovery. So I have a lot of stuff that I have in the slideshow that is going to be shared from Jessica for all of you around like our work in context of recovery education. But I do want to take some time if anyone has questions before you have to head back into your regular workday.
I have a question. How
Yeah.
would one start the referral process?
Yeah. So a lot of times people will email me directly, which is perfectly fine, honestly. We also on our website have a link to an application that if you, I mean, as an EDM, it's totally appropriate for you to be able to fill that out yourself. There's also a referral form that if you want to like make sure we have the contact information for a family and we reach out, we can do that too. So email, people call, and then the referral or the application.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if anyone has follow-up questions,